Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the line between right and wrong blurs and what feels forbidden becomes irresistibly tempting? My name is Olivia, and life changed dramatically when my mom remarried. Suddenly, I had a stepdad, Michael, a man who stepped into our lives without warning. At first, he seemed like a good guy helping around the house, being friendly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get complicated. As a teenager, I was caught between my old life and this new reality, unsure how to feel about him being around. My mind was a mix of confusion and curiosity. Initially, I barely paid attention to him. I was busy with school and friends, trying to navigate the chaos of teenage life. But then something changed. There were moments that felt charged, like the air was thick with unspoken words. I caught him looking at me in ways that made my heart race and my mind question everything. I knew I should be grateful for his presence, but every time he was around, a strange tension filled the room. It was as if we were both dancing around something that neither of us dared to name. Deep down, I felt an unsettling mix of attraction and guilt, and I couldn't ignore the fact that I was on the brink of crossing a line I didn't even know existed. At first, it was just small things. I'd catch Michael looking at me, and there'd be this pause, this second too long that felt strange. I wondered if maybe was imagining it. Why would he look at me like that? But then I'd feel his gaze drift away, leaving me questioning everything. And then there were those little touches. We'd pass each other something, a glass, a book, and our hands would brush. Every time I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. One evening, Mom had to work late. It was just Michael and me at home. I kept to myself at first, but then, as I came into the living room, there he was, watching TV alone. The silence felt thicker, like I couldn't just walk in and sit without feeling something shift between us. I almost felt nervous, but I tried to brush it off. It's just an evening, I thought. Don't make it into something it's not. But the air around us felt different, somehow heavier. I knew he felt it too. Neither of us said a word about it, but we didn't need to. Why was I even thinking about it? I was trying to figure out why he was looking at me like that, why these little things made my heart race. I hated that I felt something. And as much as I told myself to get a grip, the questions wouldn't stop. Every time I told myself it was nothing, my mind kept circling back. I found myself drawn to him, my thoughts tangled up in something I didn't want to admit. Part of me wondered if he felt it too, but I wasn't ready to find out. It was late one night. Mom was still out, and I decided to watch a movie to pass the time. I heard Michael's footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn around. Part of me was curious, wondering if he'd join me. Before I knew it, he was sitting right there, close enough that I could feel his presence. I could barely focus on the screen, my heart racing, every second feeling like it was building up to something. He leaned closer, just enough for me to feel the shift. I didn't move. I could feel the warmth radiating off him, his arm brushing mine. The smell of his cologne drifted over, something subtle but unmistakable. The room felt still, the air thick with something unspoken. My pulse was pounding in my ears as I looked at him. He didn't say a word, but his eyes met mine, lingering, searching, as if waiting for something. Every instinct told me to pull away, but I was frozen, trapped in that moment, caught up in something I didn't want to name. For a heartbeat, it felt like he might lean in closer, like we were both teetering on the edge of something we couldn't take back. The distance between us felt impossibly small, like all it would take was one move, one breath, for the line to blur completely. And then, the unmistakable sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway broke through. We both jumped back, reality crashing down around us. I felt my face flush. my heart still pounding as if I'd been caught doing something I couldn't even name. Michael moved quickly, putting space between us, and I forced myself to focus on the sound of her footsteps coming closer. The moment was over, but the tension, the thing we almost let happen, hung heavy in the air. That night, I barely slept. My mind replayed every second of what happened and almost happened with Michael. I felt waves of guilt washing over me. This wasn't just any guy, he was my mom's husband. I knew how wrong it was, but I couldn't shake the memory of that moment, the intensity of it, the way it left me feeling both exhilarated and ashamed. The next morning, everything felt different. When I saw Michael in the kitchen, I couldn't see his eyes. Part of me wanted to avoid him completely, but another part felt this strange pull to him. Almost like I needed to see if he felt the same confusion, the same guilt. Did he feel what I felt? I caught myself wondering if he'd mention anything, but he kept things perfectly normal, which somehow made it worse. As the days went by, every interaction between us felt loaded. I'd catch him looking at me sometimes, and we'd both look away, pretending it hadn't happened. Whenever he was near, my heart would start racing like I was standing on the edge of something again. I tried my best to act naturally around him, to ignore whatever tension was still there, but it felt impossible. It was like we both knew we couldn't cross that line, but no matter how hard I tried to forget, the moment lingered between us like a shadow. I kept asking myself why I couldn't just let it go. Why did it bother me so much? Why did I keep replaying it in my mind? Every time I thought I was ready to move on, some small reminder would pull me back. I started to feel guilty, not just about what had almost happened, but about the thoughts that wouldn't leave me alone. My mind was constantly at war, one side reminding me of all the reasons this was wrong, and the other whispering that it was too late to ignore how things had changed between us. We both began this careful dance of avoidance. If I knew he was in a room, I'd go somewhere else. If I heard his voice, I'd find an excuse to leave. But the distance only made it harder to shake off the memory, to stop thinking about what we both seemed unable to say. And every time we crossed paths, unexpectedly, I'd feel that same rush, that same conflicted feeling. It happened one evening, weeks after that night. I was in the living room, lost in thought when Michael walked in. For the first time, he didn't avoid me. He looked at me with a steady gaze, one that seemed to see right through the defenses I'd been trying so hard to build. I felt a lump rise in my throat, realizing that whatever was going to happen, we couldn't keep ignoring it. He spoke first, gently but directly. We need to talk about what happened, or almost happened. I could barely meet his eyes as he spoke. But there was a weight to his words, a sense that he was carrying the same confusion and guilt that I was. He admitted that he'd been struggling too, that the moment had surprised him just as much as it had me. For a second, a part of me felt relief, like I wasn't alone in feeling this way. But it also made the situation feel heavier and more real. We both knew that line was one we could never cross. As he spoke, I felt a clarity settle over me. Whatever connection we'd felt, whatever magnetic pull had drawn us together, it wasn't something we could give into. It was wrong, and we both knew it. Maybe it had started from loneliness or misunderstandings, but at the end of the day, the people we'd hurt, especially my mom, outweighed any fleeting emotions we might have felt. This wasn't a romance. It was a tangled mess of unspoken desires and boundaries that had been blurred for a moment. We both decided then and there to make a conscious effort to rebuild the boundaries we'd let slip. It wasn't going to be easy, we both knew that, but we owed it to ourselves and to my mom to put the moment behind us. There would be no lingering glances, no accidental brushes of hands. We agreed to keep things formal, even distant if needed, to ensure nothing like that would happen again. It was a painful decision, but also a necessary one. In the days that followed, I tried to focus on my own path, to find ways to occupy my mind and distance myself from what had almost happened. We'd both come dangerously close to a line that could have ruined lives, and as much as it hurt to let go of those fleeting feelings, I knew it was the right choice. Looking back, I realized that sometimes clarity comes from understanding what we're willing to sacrifice to protect the people we care about, even if it means silencing parts of ourselves in the process. As I look back, I wonder if moments like these teach us more about ourselves than we'd care to admit. We all have choices, lines we almost cross, and lessons we carry forward. Maybe it's in those tough decisions where our true strength lies. What do you think? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to walk away, even when it hurt? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like more stories that dive deep into life's complicated choices, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thanks for listening.